back to another episode of CRE, The Unspoken Truth. I am Charlie Capola, joined with my dad, Craig. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be
Our
here.
our topic today is the evolution of office space. So I'm talking to an office broker. You've been doing office deals for 40 years. You got into the business in the
4
80s.
years.
Um, let's start at the beginning. What was office like then? And if you could, high level, and I want to kind of dive into each part of like some of the major changes of office, but let's start high level. How has office changed from when you joined brokerage and to where it is today?
Well, today, I mean, that's a big chasm, right? Today, we're going through 2024, we're going through a whole sea change of how people use office space. We'll talk about that later. But when I first got into the business, I was in Phoenix, Arizona. There was 30 million square feet of office space. At one point, 4 or 5 years into my career, I had 3 million square feet listed. So I had 10% of the market. And so back in those days, it was a fairly small market. And I thought I was getting in at the end of the market. And it was, as it turns out, and looking back, I was getting in the golden years, going from 30 million to 110 million square feet. So I got in, and this is the first thing I think the Unspoken Truth podcast says is if you think you're really good, get into a market that's not growing and see how good you are. Those brokers that are in markets where they're negative or are not growing, those are the ones who are really doing well. I've been in a market that's been growing, so I have been blessed to have picked, and I did it purposely. But as you know, I started my career in Chicago, but I've been blessed to be in Phoenix.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you joined in the 80s. There was a recession in the late 80s, early 90s, maybe the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s.
Well, the RTC in the 87.
Yep.
So I started in 84. So you look at 84 to 87. I was only 3 years into the business when we had the RTC, which was arguably the biggest recession for commercial real estate, 87 to say 93 or 4.
Mhm.
And I was just growing my business. I remember the seasoned brokers going, "Oh man, it just sucks. Oh, this is horrible." And I was like, "What? I just had my best year ever," because I was going from nothing. I made like 30 grand my first year, and then I made 50 grand or then 100 grand. And I was like, I, dude, I like this business. And so one of the good news is and the bad news on the RTC days is it was good because I hadn't ever experienced the kind of money that the seasoned brokers had. And so I blew through the RTC days, always getting better. The bad news was if I was smarter or had been 2 years earlier, started a couple of years earlier, if I would have gotten out of college earlier, I probably would have acquired way more real estate. I didn't acquire any real estate in the RTC. And that was, in hindsight, the one opportunity in the last 40 years where a broker could have acquired real estate and made tons of money. And a lot of did. So I missed it. So the
Yeah.
RTC days is the first one. And then we had the dot-com bubble. The dot-com bubble was really short. It lasted a year. We had great listings. We were fine. But I think what I think what always happens, and it's happening right now, is the second thing that has to happen is people say commercial real estate is cyclical. It will always be cyclical. You have to understand if you're going to make a career that this is going to be part of your business. And so to bulletproof your business, you have to kind of look at it, say what does well when the market goes down. Okay, sales of if you're going to acquire real estate, you're going to acquire it. Are you going to doing some sales at the bottom? Changing people change as building sales happen. Listing agents gets changed. The whole indication of what we had when I was first in the business, we had a whole bunch of local owners, and over the last 40 years, we've seen more and more institutionals, which makes our business harder at being at Lee and Associates, because the CBREs, JLL, Cushman and Wakefield, those are the institutional brokers. And so when institutional people buy listings, then we have to compete with the bigger shops for those. So there's a whole bunch of things you have to think about to go through. And that's one of the things that we are trying to get across on this podcast on a fairly regular basis is thinking about your business is critical to your business. What you did last year might not work this year. And where is the business going and how are you going to react to it?
Yeah. Yep. So local owners to institutional owners has been a big change in your career, right? And is that that's true office. It sounds, I believe that's true retail and industrial as well, right? Just commercial in general.
Well, for 20 years, we were they called us a second tier
Secondary to,
city. Yeah,
yeah.
second tier city. And so 25 years, 30 years maybe. And so we were always, if Atlanta and LA and New York were
Dallas,
doing
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
Dallas. And so they're like, now we're a big city, fourth largest city in America. We've got tons of space. But even then, it's not just the institutional buyers, it's the other buyers that come in as well. There's lots of out-of-state buyers who have deep pockets who come into our market and buy, and they're coming in blind. They don't know uh, Capola Cheney. They don't know us, and then I would assume across the country, when somebody comes into a market, we have a lot of brokers in smaller marketplaces, so they're always having to see who's coming into their marketplace, and you have to be ready, prepared to do something as the market's moving in that direction to be able to get the business.
Yeah. So, 2008-9 financial crisis. I know I had a front row seat to you. It hit you hard. Walk me through that office change, and obviously everyone got their ass kicked.
Yeah, so we had, our family had a bunch of real estate. I remember sitting here, right here as our home office. I was sitting here and writing my balance sheet down. I finally said, screw it, I'm going to write it down, and I cut it in half. I literally took our balance sheet, which I thought was it was very robust, and cut it in half and said, okay, now we can start at half. And so it's not just and I think our revenues at our team were down half. So, not only do you cut your balance sheet, but you cut your revenues down in half. But within that, there's also opportunity. And so at that time, we doubled down and we did really well. So as the market came out, not only did my balance sheet rebound, it took a long time for it to rebound, but it's way more stronger today, way more diversified than it was. And back in those days, it was fairly singular. And then we also diversified our base of how we operate. We do tenant rep and we do landlord. We sell some buildings. Like this year, I think we're going to end up selling somewhere 10 different transactions, selling 10 buildings, which is not what we normally do. So it's going to help us kind of make our money given this tough time for office.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have a bunch of, which is it's really surprising, because we do have a lot on our OneSource platform. We have a lot of people who do a lot of different specialties,
Generalists.
generalists. Yes, we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And that has been one of the surprising things about starting this company, is how many generalists there are across the country and how well they do.
Yeah.
They do very
There's a
well.
ton, and they generalists. I mean, even I'm thinking of some of the small town,
Yep.
Minnesota,
Yep.
Georgia, and they'll do
Iowa.
residential. They'll do
Yep.
it all. I mean, true generalists. And then we have, there are variations of SIORs who do both office and industrial, and that's maybe a version of a generalist. But we have everybody,
We have your
yeah,
Cushman guys in New York who are, what are they, multifamily in New York?
industrial.
Industrial, big
Yeah.
group, only do industrial. So we're
Yeah.
across the board, but
Specialists. Yeah. Yeah.
it shows you that there is an opportunity for everybody, whoever they want to do. What I think one of the lessons I've learned is I've been with, Grubb and Ellis and now Lee, which is Lee's the fifth largest firm now in the country. So I've been what's considered now a big. I was with Grubb, who was one of the three, and then we went to Lee, who was small, and Lee's now grown over the 33 years we've been at Lee, back to number five. And so I'm with a big firm again, and we've tend to specialize. And during this cycle right now, if we're jumping to what's going on here with COVID, post-COVID, flexible hours, people working remote, and how we're changing office space, one of the things that we're doing, and one of the things I'm super thankful for, is I'm at Lean Associates. So we are doing. I just looked on our deal view today when we had our team meeting. We have 19 industrial transactions. We have 9 medical transactions. We have 10 sales that we've done. I mean, so we are diversifying what we're doing. So I'm taking some of the lessons that we've learned from OneSource and saying, hey, let's do this. What we do, we're really good at, and let's broaden it a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're doing that.
How have companies and tenants changed the way they look at their office space over your career?
Okay,
I know recently work from home and hybrid, right?
again, that's been a cycle too. It's been really interesting. When it depending on how robust the office or the job market is, depends on how people look at office space. If there are tons of people, unemployment is high, people just they go cheap office space. Corporate real estate directors drive decisions, and they're like, "Hey, I'm paid." The corporate real estate director tends to be paid on the P&L. I'm paid on what my portfolio spend is, and if I can decrease it 10%, then I will. Now, and so I've had over the years tons of real estate directors fly in and go, "Where's the cheapest space? I'm moving there. I don't care if my people leave me." Well, in the last 5 years, that's changed dramatically, right? There is a war for talent, and it looks like if you look at the demographics, there's going to continue to be a war for talent over the next 5 to 10 years, and maybe longer, depending on what AI does. But that war for talent is saying to office space users, we don't tour today, really, a corporate real estate director without an HR person, without a chief people person, without somebody who's saying, this is going to sell. And so what's happened now is office space, highly amenitized, class A office is hot. Everything else is persona non grata. And so we're seeing class B just get hammered. Class A, really high rents. Literally within a 2 mile radius, you can see a $50 rent and a $30 rent, $20 a foot differential. And you're in the same submarket, not quite as nice a building, but it's fine. And $20. So let's say you're 10,000 feet. It's 200 grand a year on a 10-year deal. It's $2 million, and they're paying for it. And so it's really interesting. In fact, one of the first times that we saw this in Phoenix, Lincoln Property Company, Dave Crumbody's company, built this mid-rise building down in the Papago on the 202, and they leased the whole building. We were competing for DoorDash. We had this utilitarian 2-story building. Dave had this brand new mid-rise. The rent differential was at least $22 a foot. I mean, it was massive. DoorDash picked the nicer LPC building. And I was like, okay, this is a change. I never thought that I'd see a $20 a foot differential in the real estate guys buy off on going to the nicer building. And they did for that size deal, a couple 100,000 feet.
Wow.
It's
So
crazy.
it's, these companies are now looking at office space as almost a benefit to their employees, right? It's a
Yeah.
similar viewpoint probably,
Yeah,
right?
we're right. We're right. We have a weekly blog, our C2 Voice.
Yeah.
We're one of the blogs coming out in the next 6 months. It'll be out after this is out. Is on smells in office space.
Yeah.
Literally, how now office space people are putting these kind of spells that will help you want to be there more or whatever. I'm like, for an old school guy, it's like, are you shitting me? It's like, this is crazy. And this is what's happening. We literally, there was a New York Times article last week that talked about this. I'll pull up the name of it here. It was like the crazy, I got it. And I'm like, we're literally going to be writing about this right now. I'm like, okay, that's
Wow.
what we're doing.
Wow.
Here's the name of it: the hotelification of offices with signature scents and saltwater spas, out of the New
Yeah.
York Times. That's the article we're using because we use an article, and it was written this week. Here we are, and we're in August of 24.
Wow.
There it
The
is.
other thing that's happening today, I know, with office space is the repurpose of office buildings. Right? So you see Class B space is getting hammered almost to the extent, and I would assume in some cases people are doing this, they're converting it to multifamily or industrial, depending on what the
Well,
best use is, right? I know
every
you wrote a series of blogs on, you spent a lot of time on those, on what does it take to repurpose an office building,
yeah,
right?
it's very difficult to do. Everybody always says, "Oh yeah, we'll just make it into multifamily." Very hard to do. With the client last week, is a 100,000 foot building they needed to sell, and the first thing they asked is, "Can we make this apartments?" I'm like, "You don't have enough windows. Your bay depths are too deep." So I was with one of my partners this morning, and he's doing a deal, which is really interesting. He's got about a 60,000 foot 2-story office building that's just getting hammered, and they're turning into storage, and it's 9 foot ceilings. And I'm like, you can do that? And he's going, yeah, we can do that. And I go, what are you doing with the parking? He says, we're going to try and get the zoning so we can park like RVs. which is in an office building in the middle of the city. So now you're going to have RV parking if the city allows it. And so this is the kind of things that are happening live right now, August 24, and we're seeing people kind of just what can we do? Because I do think in our market of 108 million, there's 3 to 5 million square feet that's going to simply go away. It will disappear, whether it gets demolished and something else goes in its place, it gets repurposed into some multifamily or into storage in this case, or into whatever. We're going to see that. So there's a lot of people trying. There's no one set way that it fits because each market is in separate, but it's certainly not doing traditional office space where we're running with a tenant that needs 5,000 square feet and we find them space.
Yeah.
We're doing that, but those people that were in are leasing 5,000 square feet are in 10,000 square feet now, and so they're going to be shrinking. They're shrinking at least 30% when their lease rolls.
So the last question I have for you on this topic, has there ever been a bigger evolution, transformation of the office market than the COVID, work from home hybrid, this catalyst, from COVID?
No,
No.
not with the lasting ramifications that we're seeing.
Yeah.
The way that 10 years or say 6 years, this decade of the 20s, what we'll be looking at will be a completely different marketplaces.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting, not we have a bunch of square feet in Phoenix, but you're talking about New York City space and the cities like New York and San Francisco and some of these Los Angeles downtown. They have buildings that were built way before us, right? We weren't building high rises in the 30s like they were 1930s, and so they have the same similar problems that we do times 10. And so there's going to be across the country a whole change. And I do think we were talking about, how we have people who use and do brokerages across the spectrum. Those brokers tend to be more resilient, and they have good ideas because they could see, well, this office building could be retail. And that's a valuable trait where a guy who's like me, who's been doing office space for 40 years, I'm really good at what I do, but trying to get creative is it's a growth for me. I'm trying to grow right now.
I was thinking as you were talking earlier a few minutes ago, one of the things that this transformation really, really favors is entrepreneurs, people who are really entrepreneurial about their business, those who are business owners, and they embrace experiments, and they embrace pivots and small changes to their business. They're not afraid to step outside the office, asset class. I would imagine, right, a big change in the market would favor office brokers who are entrepreneurial that way.
Yeah, it was funny. The partner I was talking to is in our industrial group, but he's a very creative guy. He really works on stuff that's like this. So I started the conversation like, hey, Nate, the market's coming your way. This is where you're going to shine. Tell me what creative deal you got. Because he's always working on something just like this. And that's when he popped this idea. He's got a deal in escrow. And I'm like, man, that's a really good, because I'm thinking heads down, canvas more, cold call more. And he's like, no, I got this idea and I'm working on it. So for those folks that can do this, there could be an opportunity over the next 3 to 5 years to kind of really make some money and do some really cool things.
Well, I think it's worth thinking about, regardless of if it's something you say is a skill of yours or not. It's worth just at least spending some time thinking about. But a couple of highlights I wrote down: some of the big changes, at least in Phoenix, right? Local owners to institutional owners as the market has grown. That's been a big change in your career. I liked this point. If the unemployment rate was high, people tended to want cheaper space, right? They looked at it as like they could get talent regardless of what their space looked like. Now there's a talent war, and people are looking at higher, more expensive office space, bigger amenities. And the last point I wrote down, there has not been a bigger transformation in office, bigger than COVID. So
here's an interesting thing. We said from local buyers to institutional buyers, and guess who's buying today?
Who?
Local buyers.
Really?
Institutional guys are out.
Yeah.
You can't get an
Buying
institution.
office.
Yeah, you can't get an
Yeah.
institutional guy to buy office
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
And so it's like this big cyclical thing. So it's like, hey, if you just stick around long enough, it'll come back. I remember hiking. We did a hike years ago called the Torres del Paine, which is in South America. It's in Patagonia, and the weather changes all the time because the trade winds. It's the only place in the world where the trade winds circle around the world with no land to stop them. So they're circling really fast, and the only very southern tip of South America stops it. Doesn't really stop it; it just blows through. And we got there on an afternoon, and it was the most glorious afternoon. Charlie, the flowers were out. We were sitting there. We wake up the next morning. The wind was blowing 100 miles an hour. We literally had to lean into it. By the third day, it was snowing on us. The fourth day, it was torrential rain, like 10 inches of rain in 4 hours, all within a 3 to 4 day period of time. And I'm like, that's what the office market like. It's just a little bit longer, 40 years. It's going to rain on you. It's going to snow. It's going to be sunny sometimes.
Yep.
So, get prepared.
Yep.
Buckle
Get
up.
prepared. Buckle up. It's a good metaphor. Awesome. Well, you
All
heard
right.
it here, the evolution of office space. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.